All right. Hello, everyone. We are live on the D-Day Squadron YouTube channel. We had a little bit of an issue live streaming to Facebook due to an update unbeknownst to us. So that's okay. We have other platforms and we learn to be fluid and flexible and adapt as our World War II veterans had to do 80 years ago, as Alan, I'm sure, can relate. So we're so thrilled that on the very anniversary today of powered flight, as 121 years ago in 1903, as well as the maiden flight of the DC-3 anniversary, which is the 89th year this year, that we can share this broadcast with Alan, who is here with us today. He is excited. We've been talking with him a little in the background here about his service in World War II and his experiences and his training. And we're just thrilled to be able to share it across our platforms with our friends, our family all over the world. We have some other cool, neat things to share in this broadcast and to push out to our live audience. We have prize giveaways. If you're a lucky winner, you will get a nice 2024 Legacy Tour package, as Alan recently had delivered his way, wink, wink. And if you want to sport the gear of our precious, memorable tour over in Europe, where we had a number of DC-3 C-47 type aircraft participate. And Alan's going to talk a little bit more with the group about that here shortly. We had some news that dropped today as we start to look forward and look ahead as a DC-3 society. And no, the D-Day Squadron doesn't go away. It's not dissolving to kill all those questions, but the DC-3 society will become and has been for some time a program fully supporting those that really care about all that the DC-3 has accomplished in war and in peace. And so we will continue doing our flying platforms commemorations, membership gatherings, and other great events and outreach, especially as we look to 2025 with the 90th anniversary of the maiden flight of the DC-3. So quickly want to just give a introduction here, these two young fellows, these two young handsome fellows that join us. We have Henry yes, Henry, you are. Yes, Henry. Henry Simpson is here with us. He is a founding member of our Young Historians program that we started some years ago as a great way for our young historians to share peer-to-peer the untold stories of our veterans. And we also have joined with us Adam Eats here, who is a writer for Vintage Aircraft News, in addition to supporting our writing and our newsletter with the DC-3 Society. Both of these young gentlemen are members to our organization, have been a big support to our organization, and got to be a part of the Legacy Tour and capturing great footage and photos. And of course, we have the handsome Alan Shapiro here with us today, out of Pennsylvania, which is my home state as well. And so we're actually going to get started. I'm going to come off camera because nobody wants to see me, of course. And I'm going to let the gentleman here take over, starting with Henry. Thank you all.
Well, Alan, it's an absolute honor to get to speak to you. We've heard a little bit about you, but for the benefit of everyone on the call, you were only 18 when you entered service and you signed up in 1943. I have to ask you, first of all, what was that like as an experience? And then arriving in England in 1944, I believe. What was it like seeing England as a British native? What was it like back then?
Well, I had always wanted to fly as a child. And so when I was called up for service, and so I was born the same year the DC-3 was made a C-47. 43 was when I was called up for service. But my first training was as a fighter pilot. And that was my goal in life, to become a fighter pilot. And I went through training in the United States, and my first glimpse of Britain was of Scotland because we came across on the Queen Mary and we came up into the Firth of Clyde. And what a sight for me to look out the porthole, and there's a beautiful castle on the mountain. I was just struck by the beauty of the countryside. Unfortunately, and here's the kick. I call myself a hybrid pilot because my graduating class, we graduated and got our wings as fighter pilots on August 4th, 1944. Immediately after, we were sent up not for advanced fighter training, but to become glider pilots. The word was that the military brass had decided they really didn't need fighter pilots any longer. What they needed were airborne troops, airborne operations, and for that they needed glider pilots. And there we were, this nice new bunch, it just graduated, and uh, we were taught how to fly gliders. Uh, we objected to it because we didn't like it. We were, you were young guys. We were ready to go. And we hated flying the gliders. We just did everything until a couple of the boys tried to do a loop, and the glider did not loop. Unfortunately, they were killed. So but we graduated. We got our glider pilot wings, and then we're shipped to Britain. And as I told you, I loved my first sight of Britain. And then we were put on a train and sent down to the Midlands of England. It was my first experience with tea with cream, because we had always had tea at home without any cream. And I thought, well, this is pretty good. And we came to a little village where there was a RAF base called Cottesmore. And Cottesmore was the home of a C-47 squadron, the 316th Troop Carrier Squadron, it was called that, among other things. And while I was there, it was first in the 9th Air Force, and then we were part of the 1st Allied Airborne Unit, and finally we were just part of the Troop Carrier Command. But it was interesting as a single engine pilot and glider pilot now to have this twin engine C-47 in front of us, no training in it, and nobody knew what to do with us. So they said, well, look, you guys are pilots. Why don't we put you in the co-pilot seat of the C-47, and you can learn how to fly the C-47 that way until we've received orders what we're going to do with you. So they did that. This was my first stop in England. I loved the area. It was a great area. And we had great dances on Friday night in Leicester, where all the young ladies in the area would come over and we'd have dances. It was wonderful. And word came finally that they had a mission set for us. They gave me and my group 2 hand grenades and a little machine gun of some sort. And I said, what do we do with these? And my commanding officer said, well, you'll fight with the paratroopers. I said, we'll fight with the paratroopers. Yeah, you're going to fight with the paratroopers. You'll have paratroopers on your glider and you'll just fight with them. I said, how long do we fight with them? And they said, well, until you can break through to our lines. Didn't sound like a good thing to me. That night, I sat down, I wrote my last letter home to my parents, tears streaming down my face, because I didn't think I'd survive. Uh, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, bing, bing, loudspeaker through the barracks, whatnot. Mission canceled, mission canceled. And so the mission was canceled. We still hadn't gone on a glider mission. Um, so there we were, me and my group of 18-year-olds, and we were flying the C-47, trying to learn how to fly it. Never received any instruction in it. We just picked it up as we went. And we became good pilots of a C-47. I went to my commanding officer and I said, "Sir, I'm trained as a fighter pilot. I don't want to just carry troops in a C-47." And he says, there are no openings. I said, "Sir, I hate to say this, but I'll even go for a twin engine, like B-25, B-26. Nope, no openings." I said, "The last thing in the world I want is to fly a bomber, the big bomber, but I'm willing to go there." And he said, "No openings." Then he turned to me, he says, "Now look, Shapiro, if you're so anxious to experience combat, I'll put you in the infantry tomorrow." That didn't sound that's the right move either. I said, "Sir, my God, the country spent $50,000 training me. I can't let that go to waste." But at any rate, so I stayed with the C-47 squadron. Uh, the squadron itself took part in um, the Market Garden operation, and we were then looked at as replacements because we lost a few planes. Uh, we took place in the Battle of the Bulge, and I was part of the Battle of the Bulge. Uh, we also took place in uh, taking the paratroopers over the Rhine. Uh, so that we were active, but most of the time, our role, my role, was to follow Patton's tanks, and wherever Patton's tanks went, we would land, supply them with more ammunition, supply their tanks with their gasoline and whatnot. So we were in actually flying bombs. If anybody put a stray bullet in the air, yeah, we would just blow up it like that because we were nothing but ammunition and gas. And we had some interesting experiences. Just interesting. One day we landed at a German airfield that had just been overrun by the tanks. And remember, we're kids. And we noticed a Volkswagen in the parking lot. So I said to the guys, I said, "Look, we've got landing ramps. What do you think? Are we loading ramps?" So we loaded the Volkswagen on our plane and took it back. So I can tell you honestly that we captured a Volkswagen. One of our great experiences of the war. Um, but these are things, and I love to fly. Let me say this. I just, to me, being up in the air was just wonderful. But waiting for this opening in the fighter squadrons, which we felt that sooner or later was going to come. But finally, word came from commanding officers saying, "Boys, there are openings in the fighter squadrons, but unfortunately, there are only openings for half of you." So he says, "What the fairest thing I can do is you'll draw straws." Well, I I drew the wrong straw. I stayed with the C-47, but a terrific thing happened. At the end of the European War, they sent us to South America. You say, what in the hell are you doing in South America? Well, the military set up a aerial highway from Europe to Dakar in Africa, to Ascension Island in the middle of the South Atlantic, to Natal, Brazil, which is the easternmost corner of Brazil, up the coast all the way into Puerto Rico and Miami. And that was to get the men who had been fighting the longest home the fastest. And me and my C-47 had the route from Natal, Brazil, up to Belém, Brazil, which is on the mouth of the Amazon River, and about a 300-mile thing. And that was our route. Meanwhile, the Japanese War was going on, and we felt, sooner or later, we're just going to be shipped to the Pacific. And so it was an interesting, I had an interesting.
Alan, I wanted to ask, when you were in Europe, whereabouts were you on VE Day, Victory in Europe Day? What was that like for you actually being in Europe?
It was a well-contained celebration. What we did was we decided that we would close the officers' club and distribute all the liquor to everybody, but evenly. So I got 1 quart of Australian red wine and 1 quart of champagne. And I went out on the streets of Abbeville, France, because we had moved our airbase from England to France by that point, and became startlingly drunk. And a young lady, a young French lady, came up to me, and I thought, oh, that's nice. I got a nice French girl, and saw that I needed help, and took me home to her home, and I met her family, and the family. I remember her father coming and making sure, came over with compresses my head and take care of me. And I spent the night there, but they took care of me. So I really got to know the French family, and it was a wonderful experience.
And
that was it.
yeah, Alan, and you were actually back this past year, 80 years after D-Day, and we're approaching VE Day 80 now. And you are actually back in France this year, and were able to fly on a combat veteran C-47 once again.
Here, then it was an 18-year-old boy. And here was a man almost 100 years old, was 99 years old on celebration of D-Day, the 80th year. And I was given this tremendous surprise. No one had even whispered any thought of this to me. And here I was given an opportunity to fly a C-47. I got on this, they say, did you want to see this plane? And I said, yeah, I want to see it. Do you want to go inside? Oh, I'd love to go inside and see it. And the co-pilot got up and said, oh, here, take my seat. And I said, fine. And then the pilot said, put your hands, get feel comfortable. And then he says, do you have it? He says, it's all yours. And he gets up and leaves. And there I am with the C-47 that I haven't flown for 80 years. And It was just remarkable. And we were flying over in formation, three C-47s, and we were flying over the D-Day beaches. So it just was an incredible experience.
That truly is just extraordinary there. Um, so one of the things that we were wanting to bring up to our audience that's listening and watching us in right now is since you mentioned your air campaigns throughout the war in Europe, did you ever encounter any German aircraft in the air with you?
I did well, only one. The last, just prior to the war in Europe ending, I was in a formation, and a zip, something came flying through the formation, and it was our first glimpse of an Me-262, the German jet. Unfortunately, it knocked my commanding officer out of the sky. He was killed, and so that was otherwise we were on resupply missions when we weren't dropping paratroopers for specific airborne operations.
So another thing, I know we mentioned this before we went live, but for the benefit of our listening and viewing audience, you went over a couple of the airplanes that you learned to fly in through primary, basic, and advanced training, and then of course the gliders before going on the Queen Mary to Scotland and then to England. Could you tell us a bit what it was like to fly aircraft such as the Stearman, the Vultee BT-13, and the AT-6, and some comparisons on the pros and cons of those airplanes?
The Stearman, which was the uh, first airplane that we experienced in training, was had an open cockpit, bi-wing airplane, fixed gear, fixed propeller, and the instructor would sit in the front cockpit, open air, and the student would sit in the back, in the stern. And our training was pretty elementary. Well, first of all, we had to learn how to take off and land. As a matter of fact, and then I think we were only given 6 to 8 hours to solo, to get to proficient enough to solo. And if we were not proficient in 6 to 8 hours of instruction, we were dropped out of the program. I was fortunate that I passed, and we learned to do stalls and spins and loops, and it was the basic maneuvers in the airplane. And as an 18-year-old kid who loved to fly, I was having a ball. I'm particularly I love to go up and fall into a spin. And hope that I was going to get out of this thing, and the joy when you pop the stick and you suddenly come out of the spin. It was a wonderful experience, and from there we went. If we passed that, uh, which was about 2 to 3 months of training, we would then go to basic training, and that was a more sophisticated airplane, only in that it was enclosed, it had an enclosed cockpit. You still had the instructor in front, and you were in the stern, and a fixed landing gear and a fixed propeller. But it had a more powerful engine. And did I mention it was a BT-13 was the designation? And here we did some more sophisticated training. We did some training at night cross countries. We did formation flying. And some of the more intriguing Immelmans, things that gave us better idea of controlling the airplane. Snap rolls, slow rolls, that sort of thing. And if we live through that, and I must say, through my training, all my training, 1 year of training, uh, we lost very close to 30% of the students in training. If they got lost on cross country at night, they landed in a swamp. They tried to do a formation flying a loop, and one slid into the other, and it was just one thing after another like that. And but those of us who survived, we graduated from advanced flying school. Advanced flying school, we flew the AT-6. AT-6 was a wonderful airplane. Just could do everything with it. All the things that you were expected to do as a fighter pilot. Even to the point with they mounted a machine gun on the AT-6, and the AT-6 they gave me in training had a bullet hole right through the base of the propeller. And I said, "Whoa, yeah, not nice. Oh, don't worry about it." They said, "We fixed it." So, uh, but it was a wonderful airplane to fly, and we graduated uh, on August 1st, 1944. And instead of being sent to advanced fighter training, where we would be assigned to either P-47 or P-51 or P-38 training, we were sent to glider training. Glider training. Here we thought we were hot pilots, and they're putting us in these boxes. And we had no control over them except getting it down to the ground. There's only one way you're going to go in a glider once it's released. That is, you hope you can get it down safely. The problem with a glider is if somebody's shooting at you from the ground, you want to get down and out of there as fast as possible. Well, of course, that's not a good thing to do because you're building up airspeed as you do that. And you just, in order to cut it down so you can get over the hedges that were in Normandy, which are 8 to 10, 12 feet tall, you'd pull back and to lift it over the hedge, but you're in then danger of stalling the aircraft and crashing. So the gliders became known as flying coffins because they were not a good choice in airborne operations. At any rate, they didn't know what to do with us, but as I said, they put us in the co-pilot seat of C-47 and said, learn how, just you'll go on missions, you'll learn how to fly the C-47. Never had official training in the C-47, just did it. And we as kids, we tried to make fun of flying the C-47. I remember one day I was on a single ship mission in the co-pilot seat, and the crew chief came up and said, "Hey, I just looked back. You know what we're carrying?" He says, I said, "What?" And he says, "Cognac." I said, "No kidding." Yeah, he says, "Everything back there marked for cognac. Cognac." I said, "Well, as soon as we're in the air, why don't you go back and let's see what's in those big containers." And he goes back and he comes in and he says, "Damn it." He says, "You know what they are? They're American uniforms being given to the French army in Cognac, France. So, but strange things happen. We one day we spotted a Volkswagen in the parking lot of a German airfield that Patton's tanks had just crossed over, and you know, if after we go over a German airfield, then the engineers have to come in and lay down the steel plank, so we can land because so many bombs over the airfield. And we do that, and we spotted this Volkswagen, and happened to mention that we did have loading ramps aboard, and we captured the Volkswagen and brought it home. It's that was that. But let me tell you about the Battle of the Bulge. That was that was my coming close to combat, because the Battle of the Bulge took place in December of 44, and uh, December 20th to 26th or something of 20. At any rate, so my group and I was flying in one of them, landed in Liège, Belgium, which was about 20 miles back of the lines. And on our particular plane, we were flying in a big cannon, a big howitzer. And so we dropped that off, and the weather closed down. We couldn't get out of Europe. I mean, there was no way of flying out. And it was the coldest that Europe had ever been for 100 years. And so we had to stay there and sleep in the airplane. And if you've ever had to sleep in a cold aluminum tube, you get a picture of what it's like. And but here's what everything came home to me. My commanding officer said to us, he says, "Look, boys, the word's come. The Germans are infiltrating our lines with English-speaking soldiers dressed in American uniforms." He says, "So if you come across anybody strikes you a little strange," he says, "just ask them, who did Babe Ruth play for?" And if they couldn't say the Boston Red Sox and New York Yankees, shoot them. And it was that raw. Shoot them. Don't ask any more questions. So I stayed at that space until the day before Christmas. Weather came better, and we were able to get out. So we took off from Liège, but we couldn't. Our air base was in England at that time, but we couldn't get back to England because England was absolutely iced over. From the air, England looked like a crystal fairyland, sparkling in the sun. And our airbase had been iced over. We couldn't get to it. The only place we could land was this emergency landing strip on the English Channel. And I must tell you, one of the most tear-jerking experiences of my war was landing at this emergency airstrip. And the people at the airstrip said, "Well, they're sorry, we have no food for you. We have done nothing. But, just park the airplanes and wait until you can fly back to your airbase." The next day was Christmas, and I stood out on the flight line, and British aircraft kept flying in with badly wounded British soldiers. And lined up as each of these planes came up, lined up were Red Cross girls and RAF women. And as each plane came in, then stretcher bearers would bring these badly wounded guys off. And these women, makes me cry when I think about it, would take a sprig of holly and put it in each man's chest and say, "Welcome home for Christmas." It was just, well, I guess we can feel it as something. But we finally did get back, and then we were transferred to Abbeville, France. And it was there that uh, word came that there were no openings in the fighter squadrons for me. And I stayed with, and then the European War ended. And what happened? They immediately took my squadron and sent us to South America.
So I just want to interject real quick. So we've talked a bit about the Battle of the Bulge, and I know that you mentioned before we went live that you yourself didn't participate in the initial D-Day assaults. So could you tell us perhaps if you guys were being held back in reserve in case they needed you on June 6th and all that?
Well, I didn't arrive in Europe until September.
Right.
So this is 3 months later. And I was there really, we were brought in as replacements for the aircraft lost during the Market Garden airborne operation, which didn't end well. And so, we brought right into service. Um,
Yeah,
I,
Alan, one thing I'd really like to ask. Of course, I helped found the Young Historians at the D-Day Squadron, and we're always keen to encourage more young people to get involved and understand and learn the history. You yourself, you were, I mean, what would you want to share with the younger generation today about your experience? What would you like to say to them?
I would like to say to anyone, particularly here in the United States, that I believe that every child graduating high school then would have to do national service of some kind for 6 months to a year. There was such a feeling of togetherness in our unit. I mean, we were from every corner of the United States, and we became one unit. Whether we were from the South, from the North, from the West, or the East, we were warriors, and we were there to get to win a war. A it 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 and you don't have that feeling of unity with the youngsters today. They, of course not. They don't have that focus. I remember this year when they brought us veterans back to France. Part of our program was to take us veterans to the schools and to the and retirement homes here in France, because the people in the retirement homes had been children under the Nazi occupation, and they would have stories. And um, but the school children, I remember one. They took my unit, 8 veterans, 8 of us. I was the only one not in a wheelchair. I was the only one that was ambulatory. And to these 11-year-old kids. And here they had us veterans lined up, and each veteran gave a story to these kids. But, I could see I was the last one to say anything. Uh, but I could see the kids were getting roochie. I mean, 11-year-old kids, you can't keep them still. So when I gave up, I didn't tell them about my experiences. I just said, how many here would like to learn how to fly? And maybe one hand went up. Then I said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach you all how to fly. Wow. And then I said, you ready? Everybody? I said, everybody on your feet. Each of the whole class got up. I said, all right, now put out your wings. They put out their arms. And I took them through all the exercises of flying an airplane with the stick and rudder. And wherever we went in France after that, we were known as the people with the wings. It was a charming and wonderful thing. Even mayors of towns would go to, and they'd say, oh, you're the people with wings. It just was wonderful. And at the retirement home, I must tell you this, there was a 95-year-old woman who insisted on sitting next to me. They couldn't figure out why she's insisting on sitting next to me, because there I am with these other veterans at the head table. But they brought a chair over so she could sit next to me. And they brought an interpreter over because I don't speak French and speak English. And she starts to say to me, she said, the minute I heard you were a pilot, I had to talk to you. She said, you American pilots on D-Day killed my mother, killed my brother. She said, but I'm here in person to thank you for giving me my liberty. Brings tears to my eyes again. This was the extraordinary feeling we found in Normandy. With all the Allied forces, I mean, we were absolutely greeted with wonder, with joy. There was nothing was too good for us. The thankfulness in the population of Normandy. I hope that gives you a picture of what we found. So that was my story. I was the fighter pilot who never became a fighter pilot. I was the glider pilot who never became a glider pilot. And I was a C-47 pilot who finally became a C-47 pilot.
Alan, I just wanted to, I'm inserting myself here again. I know nobody wants to see me, but I am inserting myself as we sort of come to looking at audience questions and getting a chance to engage further with you, is that you've given a lot of inspiration to not only an elder audience and others, but our younger audience. So this is exactly what we want our young people to hear, because what we stress in a lot of our outreach events across the US, across Europe, when we get the opportunity to have the attention of young people is, we don't have the conveniences and the advantages and the opportunities if not for our greatest generation. And I know that talking with World War II veterans like yourselves over so many years, you all never consider yourselves heroes, but to us, you are a hero. and I know that you all are so modest and humbled, and that's why we're even just more grateful is that, there's never a World War II veteran I've ever met that is just broadcasting or bragging about any of the things that they've done. If anything, they're more silent. And so, you have our hearts because you did so much for us, and you probably don't even realize everything you've done. So it does not matter if you're the fighter pilot that didn't become the trained fighter pilot, if you're the fighter pilot, the trained glider pilot, to us, what you did was you served the Allied war effort. And you made sure that they had ammunition and supplies, and you made sure to get paratroopers where they needed to go. So we did have some questions. We actually have a number with some of our DC3 Society members tuning in and obviously watching this on some platforms and hearing your story. Obviously very taken back by the story you shared with the emergency landing strip on the English Channel, which I need to look back at this because I thought I'd heard about an emergency landing strip on the channel, but I don't even know if this strip of land even exists today. Do you happen to know or be able to share a little bit more about that?
I don't recall anything about no name.
Hmm.
I, all I recall is how kind they were trying and apologizing for not having any food, and uh, and just that little episode on Christmas Day in welcoming the wounded back.
Was
That's
it
kind of
perhaps around the Pas de Calais area?
I beg your pardon?
Was it around the Calais area?
The landing strip?
Kelly.
Right, yeah.
I would say that it is a course from that,
Okay.
Yeah,
it's I
yeah, there
can't
was
be.
there were several, I think, that were kind of constructed as various landing grounds for aircraft coming back from Europe. Maybe those that needed a longer run if they were damaged. A few of them, I think, are still around. Some of them not so.
I did get a chance to go back to Cottesmore as a civilian, and the airfield was now a part of the British Army and not part of the Royal Air Force now. And then we learned that it was closed about 3 months after we visited. Uh, but my wife and I visited and found this airfield, and we took a train to Leicester and a train to Oakham, and they got a cab, and the cab took us to Cottesmore, and there was my old airfield, and there was the barracks, and there was a guard at the entrance, a nice kid. I mean, a guy about 20, 23 years old, a handsome kid. And he came up on want to know what we wanted. And we explained why it was there. And he says, "Oh," he says, "I don't have the authority," but he says, "You go in that building over there, and the major will let, give you the authority to come visit, look at the place." So I went into the major, and the major says, "No, no." He says, "I don't have the authority either." He says, "The commanding officer just left for the weekend." So he says, "I can't." He says, "But I'll tell you." So I said to him, "Well, do you mind if we just talk to the guard and point out while we're standing with him some of the things we can see?" And he said, "No, no." He says, "As long as the guard's okay, that's so okay with me." We went out to the guard, and the guard says, "Wait," he says, "wait a second." And he disappears into the guardhouse. He comes out, he's got a submachine gun on his arms, and he throws the submachine gun at me. And the cab driver and my wife dive for cover. I don't know what's going to happen. But it's, interesting things happen.
I say
Yeah,
so.
go on.
I'd say, Alan, you've had quite the interesting experiences in 100 years.
Yeah.
We've had a
And
few.
one thing you've brought up a couple of times, both before we were live and after we went live, about flying the South Atlantic route through Dakar um, and Ascension Island and Natal. And that's something that I feel for some of our viewers and listeners, they know about the North Atlantic ferry route from Newfoundland through Greenland and Iceland over to Scotland, but they don't know so much about the South Atlantic route. Could you tell us what it was like to fly that route?
Well, it's interesting. I had no idea about a South Atlantic route either. I thought it was set up just at the end of the war in Europe. But in talking to some friends whose fathers had been B-17 crew, they talked about they flew their B-17 from the United States to Europe via the southern route. In other words, the other way, down to Natal, to Ascension Island, Dakar, and up. So that was my first understanding of the route. What was interesting, that we were told we were going to be flying over jungle for the most part. And if we had engine trouble, head for the ocean, because if we went down in the jungle, they'd never find us. But maybe we'd have a chance if we ditched right on a beach or right off a beach. So that was, and I will say this, the closest I came to any kind of problem was when I myself was going back to the States from Natal, and we flew up to Puerto Rico. And at Puerto Rico, we were transferred to a civilian Eastern Airlines DC-4 400. And we took off from Puerto Rico to get to Miami, and we lost an engine on takeoff and I had to turn right around and go back. So that's the only problem I had with equipment. I think the DC, I say this about the DC-3. That is one incredible airplane. It can take it did take an enormous amount of punishment. I've seen them flying with the tip coming off of the wings. I've seen them with their empennage and shatters. The airplane, the government tried to replace the DC-3, the C-47 with the DC, what was it? I forget the namesakes, whatever it was.
C-54?
Yes. And it was they couldn't take the punishment that the DC-3 could take. We had a separate word for our C-47. You've heard the terms Goonie birds. Not us. I never heard the term Goonie bird. It was the goose. We kept calling it the goose because its wings would flap while we were would go up and down. And it was a great airplane. It still is.
I can only imagine. I mean, obviously, we're three of us are from a different era, Alan, and this is kind of leading me into. I got a few questions that came my way that people wanted to ask you that we've just filtered here. I know how I feel when I see a C-47 fly, when I see a DC-3 fly, understanding that this is one of the most widely used aircraft of our past, still flying today, still airworthy. 150 of them or so are still in operation around the world today. So someone asked, how does it make you feel when you see, having been a C-47 pilot, how does it make you feel when you see a C-47 fly? Is it nostalgia? Does it bring back memories of the war immediately, or do you just take the moment in and embrace it 80 years later?
It's a good question, and I would answer it this way. I was proud that I had flown that airplane. We had so many great times together. I, coming back from one mission, I said to the crew, "Do you mind if I just tap the top of the Eiffel Tower with our wingtip?" And they said, "Oh, we're all youngsters, so oh yeah, sounds like a great time." So I flew. We came over Paris, and I flew. There was the Eiffel Tower, and I flew the Eiffel Tower around the Eiffel Tower with my wingtip almost touching. And I thought to myself, this can end up not good. so
Yeah.
so I pulled off and pulled away from it. But during that time, I had a little camera with me. I took a shot with the camera showing my wingtip at the top of the Eiffel Tower.
Uh,
I
I
mean,
I
these are,
saw some of those photos. That's incredible.
yeah, well, you're young and you do
Yeah.
anything. And as I said, we enjoyed flying. Uh,
I
So
I
Killing
have
was
to I have to ask. I saw the are these the photos that you specifically took?
I
And
took.
you did. Okay. Okay. I mean, we don't having obviously it been so long ago, we don't really get to see these photos that often. There's obviously photos out there, but the ones that you took, this is incredible. And I just want to just quickly put this up on the screen here for folks to see. But I'm just looking at these. I'm like, wow, this is, you took these from the cockpit, right?
That's correct.
Right, right. I'm just like, wow, this is just something else to see that, knowing this is not a remake. This is not replicated. This is from Alan. This
yeah,
is Alan in a C-47. This is something else. I mean, and then the gliders,
yeah,
obviously.
the CG4s, yeah.
Yeah.
CG4As, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Henry, the Brits called those particular gliders the Hadrians there.
Yes, yes, they did, and we obviously used the Horsa primarily, which
Yeah.
was a bit better for the sort of the short field, the come in high and then get down and land.
Yeah. And,
I have to say, Alan, just as we have shared this, so a small joke about uh one of your fellow, I actually have a nice photo of him here on my desk, the Dave
ah,
Hamilton, World War II veteran. Um, so he said that this photo got him about a dozen marriage proposals during the war. And I tell you, when I have to, this, you got to have some humor in this, but look at this man right here. I mean, come on.
We were a good looking group.
I was the ladies must have loved you all. Look at that in uniform and all, the airplane. This is it right here.
That, that's the Spearman. That's the primary flight trainer behind me.
Yes, that's a great airplane. Still, those
yes,
still
yes.
flying like they do today.
Some of them are, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I tried to buy one recently, didn't work out. I would have loved to own a Stearman. That's a
Yeah.
great airplane. That is such a
Well,
great airplane.
and I've had the pleasure to go up in a Stearman myself, and I've gone up in an AT6 as well. So um, I still need to get the C-47 and the BT-13 off the list.
Well, if you've hit the AT6, you've hit the summit of training aircraft.
So I've got another question here, and again, from another younger individual, Alan. Our armed services today very different than where they were back in your day. And I think that we have a different generation, different mindsets. to be expected. We've, evolved the last 80 years. But this question is, what would you tell a young person who is nervous or maybe a little reserved about joining the armed forces, but really wants to serve their country? Do you have any advice? And maybe did you feel a level of concern or nervousness, but you were still so empowered to say, I've got to serve my country?
I don't think I had the, I wanted to fly
Yep.
and I wanted to, and we had a war on, and I wanted to do something, and it I was ready to go in and fight, and it's very interesting that I ended up not fighting in a way, never actual combat, and but the uh, the military is a great leveler. It's also a great place to learn life. Um, yeah, don't yeah, jump at the opportunity. You feel that you're not ready, but you will be ready in just a few short days. It's it's a an adventure that you ought to have.
Absolutely. A global adventure for some who get the chance to travel around the world and be based in some pretty neat areas around the globe. Um, so there just another quick question from our crew members of our of our DC3 Society, some of those that have that did venture over with you and were there with you in Normandy, but they got to know, what is your drink of choice?
My drink of choice.
Yes, do you have a beverage of choice? When our crews get together, they like a
Oh,
good beer, a good stout, a good pilsner, maybe a good bourbon.
I
Do you have a drink of choice?
yes, I have a drink of choice that comes from my time in Scotland, and it's Scotch whiskey.
Yes. That's awesome. There were some when we did this last mission and the mission before in 2019 over in Europe, the crews were talking about all the experiences they had crossing the Northern Atlantic, getting into Europe, and the different foods that they ate that they've never experienced before, especially coming from the US and not have maybe come through Scotland and Iceland or Reykjavik, Greenland before, all of these different places. Was there any one meal or food that just stood out to you during that time, or that you look back and say, man, I'd love to go back there and get that soup? Is there anything in particular that stands out?
We were very, I would, Peg and I, my wife Peg and I, were very fortunate in that we lived with a French family during the 2 weeks that we visited Normandy this year. And and we had that family on the C-47 when we took off. That family taught us a lot about French food, and we had wonderful. One thing they did point out that I that one night they said, "Would you like pizza?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Okay, we'll call and get the pizza." And it seemed that in France, at least there, um, you get pizza out of a vending machine. And so I went with my host, my French host, and we went to the neighborhood gas station, and there was a vending machine, and he puts in coins, and out came a slice of pizza.
That is, now I know about the sprinkles cupcakes vending machines, but I didn't know you can do that with pizza. That's pretty modernized.
Well, they asked me, what was it like? And I said, it was awful.
Yeah, you want a real good pizza pie or something more. Yeah, it's less maybe engineered. Is this your French family you stayed with here on the screen?
And I don't have it on my screen right
Oh,
now.
I was trying to share that. I thought that I shared the right screen. Gentlemen, can you see it there?
Well, I saw it previously, but I
Yes.
can see it again right
Oh,
now.
okay. Okay. Yeah,
No, but
I was
that,
just sharing,
that appears to be, at least I
yeah,
see the dress and that, yeah, that
yes.
John, Johnny and Marie. And
Oh,
Johnny,
wonderful. I bet that was an experience getting a chance to stay with the French family all those years later. So, uh,
wonderful,
well,
wonderful.
Al, yeah, how wonderful of them to host. That's great. I think when I go back there, I might just stay with the French family this time. That'd be great. Uh, so, Alan, that really wraps up our side of this and asking questions. But is there anything that you want to share further with all of us, the audience, us here on the Zoom?
After after our surprise trip in the C-47, when we landed, people, I think four families of the French families that were on the trip with us on the airplane came up to me and said, you know, it's the first time in our lives we've ever been in the air.
Wow.
This was what an experience for them. And I must tell you, when I was flying over the Normandy beaches and I was at the controls, I kept thinking, gee whiz, I better do this right. I can't kill all these people.
I,
it, it was wonderful to have all those French families with us.
I heard you did a great job when you flew the airplane. So
They're kind.
absolutely. There's been a lot of photos and a lot of camaraderie shared. And I know that everybody really enjoyed spending time with you.
Oh,
Uh,
the crew was marvelous. Uh,
yes.
but, and then we discovered that the co-pilot actually comes from Chestnut Hill, Philadelphia.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, taking the control area is he's there in the cockpit. Different view than 80 years ago, we know. But it's still, I bet that was very nostalgic. That was very
So
nostalgic.
everybody, just think about a 100-year-old man now flying the C-47, a 100-year-old airplane, and it it's a story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know we've all enjoyed hearing your story, hearing your experiences, especially the emotional ones that obviously, hits all of us. And just sharing that with us today, spending the time that you spent with us today, in giving back to the D-Day Squadron and sharing this love for the DC-3 with all of us. So I just want to thank everybody who has tuned in for being here. This broadcast is actually recorded, and so it will live in infamy on our YouTube channel, across our Facebook pages, as well as other platforms where folks like to engage and watch us. So we will have folks that weren't able to be in the live broadcast today, still watching later, most likely commenting, sharing this across their platforms, because my sir, you are a national treasure. And we just are so humbled and appreciate you for being here today, especially celebrating this great day and the happy birthday to the DC-3, that airplane you love so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been an honor, Alan, really.
It
And
has. I
Henry,
wish I could extend my hand out beyond the screen and shake your hand.
all right. Well, when you're ready, I'll take you for a ride.
Very good. Well, I certainly trust you.
Okay.
And to Henry and to Adam, who do a fantastic job with us, really writing a lot of the history, sharing the stories, really boosting the value of our newsletters, and support back to the Squadron and Society. Thank you both. You did great. Love this. And I hope we can do many more of these and share our greatest generation with so many. And like you say, Adam, we may not be right there shaking Alan's hand, but we are there in spirit with you, and we're giving you a big hug and a big thanks to Peg for helping us set all this up as well.
It's been my pleasure in seeing you all and being with you and talking with you. And I hope we can someday meet and I've got some more stories for you.
We want to hear them. So we'll go ahead and stop the live stream. We'll see you here in a quick second, Alan. But to all of those who are turning in live, thank you so much. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, more excitement to come. 90th anniversary next year, DC-3 maiden flight. A happy birthday